In this video, we're going to be talking about color grading workflows within the color page of Davinci Resolve. We've got a great project. This is a real life project pulled up that I've finished color grading for Mr. John Ross. John Ross is a great DP and filmmaker, and I was privileged to color grade this little spot for him. We're going to be using this as a foundation to talk about color management and color grading workflows. This is a follow-up, sort of a part 2 to my fixed node tree video, which you can check out here. And we're going to be continuing that logic and that strategy when it comes to color grading. It's really easy to understand individual tools, but when you piece it all together into a cohesive workflow that allows you to create efficient color grades, that's really important when it comes to professional color grading. So the foundation is obviously a fixed node tree, which you have here. This is a free download for you. Link is in the video description to this as well. And then on top, there is a post group clip look. So you can see here, this is the color grade basically that is applied to the whole program, the overall program. And if we just disable this, that's what the pre-look is doing. And this is what the look is doing. So I'm going to break down this look really quickly just so you get some context for the project, and then we'll move on to some strategies as to how to take on changes from the client. So basically the foundation of this is a really simple saturation, split tone, contrast curve, and then a film emulation. So what we have is a custom curve that I've set up. This is also available for you to download for free using the same Gumroad link in the video description. Then I have a couple of split tone nodes, which you can see is giving a nice color contrast in the shadows and in the highlights, and then a saturation node. This is giving saturation and also creating density at the same time. And then on top of that is primarily a whole lot of effects using the plugin Dehancer. So as we add Dehancer, it creates a really nice filmic emulation and a whole lot of juicy film grain. So this is before and after. Let's have a look at another clip. Let's have a look at this clip here. This is before and after. So the look is on top of every single shot, and it's essentially affecting every clip in the same way. This is prior, before, and after. So the first key with a color grading workflow strategy, in my opinion, is to create your look in a group post clip or in a timeline level. So this is the essence of your color grade. Now I've obviously set this color grade up with a few simple nodes. You can use any tool you want to create your color grade. And then underneath that, we apply a fixed node tree structure, such as this one here, which gives us control over your primary and secondary adjustments. These are things like exposure, white balance, contrast, hue versus adjustments, and relighting effects such as vignettes and power windows. And on every single clip, we have the exact same fixed node tree applied. So it doesn't matter what clip I'm on, every single shot has the same fixed node tree. This is really important because it creates consistency. When I'm cycling through the clips, every single node, for example, exposure 04, as I cycle through, node 4 is always exposure no matter what clip I'm on. So that's the foundation of this color grade. Let's say I'm really happy with that. I've set up a really great workflow. I've rendered off the video and sent it to the client, and now I start getting reviews come in. I've had a few questions in the past on YouTube and on Instagram about how to manage these changes as they come in. So let's talk about a few strategies. The first thing that I would always do, and you can see up here under review 1, is create a still for every single frame just in case anything changes in the future as reference. So what you can do is add a still album here over in your gallery, right click. Let's rename this review 2, for example. And what I'm going to do is right click on here and say grab all stills from middle frame. And what this will do is create a gallery still for every single shot in the entire program. And now I have a complete reference for that first initial color grade that I sent off. So in the future, if anything changes, I'm just obviously going to mess this up on purpose. Let's say that was a change for whatever reason that we wanted to do. It obviously looks horrible, but for sake of example, now what we can do is go over to add still album. And let's say we send off a third round of revisions. As we send this review off, I can then go ahead and grab all stills from middle frame. So now I have a revision 3 all lined up here in my stills. For example, now I can always go back to this shot and find it in my gallery stills, which is here, and play this still and compare these two stills from revision 2 to revision 3. This is really great because all you need to do is grab the review 2 still, drag it over here onto your window, and it is going to then absorb those changes from the previous version. Now that's one way you can manage changes. Let's have a look at another example, and this is called versions. So if we create a new version, which is added here, you can change the shortcut for version if you want to. So grade version, you can add and go next and previous. Those are my shortcuts, but we can do basically the same thing. So if revision has come back for this shot, let's say we want it to be slightly brighter and we want it to be maybe pulled back and slightly cooler in the shadows there. What we can now do is cycle between the versions. This was a previous version, and now this is the next version, the new change that we've done. So you can see really quickly the different changes that have been made. And we can also come up here and look at the different versions under our split screen. So if we go ahead and look at this in a slightly larger view, you can quickly see the differences between the versions. Now, if you're consistent with how you're creating versions, obviously the latest version will be the latest set of changes from the DP, the director, whoever is giving you reviews. And if someone's in the room, you can very quickly create a new version as well. So now this is a third version. And let's say the producer's like, no, I actually really want it to be warmer. You can really quickly make changes and then also cycle through the different versions. So let's go back to the previous. This is what let's say the producer wanted, nice and warm. This is the first initial version, and then this is a cooler version. So really quickly, I've got 3 different options, 3 different looks to pull up and to manage. But then also what you can do, and I've seen this done quite a bit, particularly watching other colorists' workflows, is if you're very, very close to the final color grade, let's say this is pretty much 100% locked and the DP and the producer is coming in just for some very final subtle tweaks at the end. What you can do in your fixed node tree is assign a couple of these final nodes to be what would be called like a DP or a trim pass. You could also do producer, and you could assign a node within your fixed node tree structure. So 21 is always going to be like the final review notes from the producer or director. Now, let's say, for example, the producer just wants a little bit, maybe more green in the shadows, and they want the shadows just lifted a touch, like very, very slightly. Now, what you can do is preview those changes made by the producer in that single node. Now, I'm not a massive fan of this strategy because it fundamentally moves your primary adjustments and sometimes secondary adjustments into a single node. And if the producer is wanting such a fundamental thing, such as a contrast change or a white balance change, I would rather just absorb it into my ratio node or my white balance node instead of having this thing at the top, which looks like it's quite a significant shift. And so, for example, now, let's say someone else comes along and says, hey, it's actually too green. I might be tempted to come back into my white balance if I've forgotten that the green is really coming from this producer node. And now in my white balance, I'm fighting this green. For example, I'm going to pull it back and try and get to a more balanced state. But now if I take this producer node off, this is not balanced anymore because I've fundamentally messed with my white balance. I would rather in my producer node only be doing really, really subtle things. And if there is such a fundamental white balance shift, what I would do is create a new version. And then I would go into my white balance and do this. And then I can cycle through my versions to quickly see that pulled up as a version. Those are a couple of ways to manage reviews. I really like the strategy that Darren Mostyn put out on his YouTube channel recently, When it comes to grading your whole program, if you're moving through a bunch of clips and there's a clip or a problem clip that might need a little bit more time, he actually creates a whole still gallery, which is just work-ons, or you can name it whatever you want. And this gallery is like a quick marker for clips that need a lot more work. So let's say this clip needs a little bit more work. We're not quite happy. What I can do is quickly grab a still and then move on to the next clip. If we get to a clip again where they're not happy, we can grab a still and move on. And what that's going to do is allow us to move through the program really quick, get to the end, have a really solid product. And then what I can do is come back to my gallery stills, work-ons, and solely work on those clips. All I need to do is right click and say match reference wipe frame, and then that's going to pull me back to that shot and allow me to get going. Let's have a look at another request that might come through when it comes to reviews. Let's say the request comes through from the producer and they say, hey, we really love this gunky shadow look and we want to see that across the board. And so what I would be tempted to do in this situation, because I know that the green was all done in the white balance, I'd grab a still of this and actually go back to my previous version and head down into producer and play this still, and then basically just match what is happening in the still on a single node. And if I want to ripple that down over a few shots, let's just take these 5 shots for example, I can select that producer node, and then I can select the shots that I want to ripple those changes to and go over to color and say ripple node changes to selected clips. What that's going to do is you'll see over on these clips now, this node 21 has absorbed those white balance changes from the producer node. So that's a really quick way to say, hey, here are those changes across a range of shots. What do you think? Now, one thing that I encounter quite a lot is when I send a review off, I'll often find comments coming in that are really specific to a shot. For example, this one, they might say, hey, there's just too much contrast in this shot. And so the first thing that I would be tempted to do is go into my ratio and reduce contrast. So again, I'll create a new version, jump into my ratio, tweak the contrast, maybe just reduce the contrast a touch. Such as that. So now I've reduced my contrast. That's great, cool, I've done that note, let's move on. And then this, let's say this is 5 shots later, a similar comment might be there like, hey, this is a little bit too contrasty. Can we reduce the contrast? So, create a new version, go ahead, reduce the contrast again. But what I might find after say 5 or 6 notes is that there's a consistent theme coming through with my review notes, and it sounds like everything's just a little bit too contrasty or not enough contrast. And so at that point, I need to analyze it and understand whether it can be made as a global adjustment within my group post clip. So I'm going to go back to these previous versions here. I'm actually going to change the look in the group post clip. So I can either add another node in here and just change the contrast, or I can actually come in and decompose this compound node, which contains my custom curve here, and actually start to create an entire new look that will ripple across the whole program and just reduce the contrast slightly. Or for example, let's say we just want to pull these shadows up slightly. So now that fundamentally changes my look across the board, and that might be a more appropriate global adjustment to do than going through every single clip and changing the contrast in the ratio node. Now it goes without saying, but to maintain the integrity of your look, you can obviously right click, add a still album, and we're just going to call this group post clip looks. And I'm just going to grab a still of this just before I go ahead and change this custom curve. So if I change the curve and completely mess it up and it goes all over the show, I can always come in and drop that initial look back on there as a version. So it's just really important to make sure that you can always go back to previous versions, because a lot of the time we make changes and then the client says, hey, I actually like the previous version, can we go back to that? And if you've overwritten it, it's really difficult to recreate it on the fly. So just make sure that you've got a breadcrumb of all of your changes. Another tool that you could use to ripple changes throughout your clips if a review comes in and someone wants to make a subtle change, but only to a handful of clips, is you could use a thing called a shared node. Now, shared nodes get out of hand pretty quick, in my opinion, but you could create a shared node such as this. It will automatically become locked. So just right click and unlock it. And now what I can do is make an adjustment to this shared node. Let's just say this is the adjustment that we want to make. Now what I can do is copy this shared node and paste it on any clip that I want. So as I paste it, it's going to be applying these changes throughout. And the beauty of a shared node is obviously if I want to now tweak this shared node, this is just for sake of example so you can see it coming through on the stills. Any change I make to that shared node ripples across all of the clips, such as these ones, which have that shared node on. Now, if I remove that shared node, it actually turns it off across the board as well. So it's a really great way to ripple changes across a whole variety of clips if you want to sort of see what that adjustment is doing across the board. Now, what we can do as well is use our selected clips preview up here. And this will show you, I'm just going to turn off that white frame. This will show you all of those clips with that shared node and what this shared node adjustment is doing to those clips. So again, if we just make a change to the shared node, you can see all of those changes applying across all 4 clips. It's a really great way to sort of understand how a single adjustment on one node will ripple across a whole range. You can go ahead and reset that shared node and it will take you back. Sometimes a shared node is a really great way to get an adjustment across a whole range of clips where the adjustment needs constant refining. So that's just a tool that you might want to use within your workflow, but all of these tools are there for you to craft your own workflow. One final workflow point that might be helpful for some people. This is definitely not for every project, but a way you can manage your look development is to create different group post clips as if they are different looks. Now, in a longer form project, you might have a whole range of different groups, and you could put the footage in different groups depending on the location, depending on the lighting environment, all of those things. And we could do that simply by opening up our Lightbox, selecting all of our clips here in the clip view, right click, and add these into a new group. So this could be called look 2 and hit OK. What's going to happen obviously is that look is going to disappear, but because we saved that look using our group post clip looks, I can use that as a template to start this next look development. And then I can go ahead and change the look fundamentally. Let's say we remove the split tone. So let's say that's a second look that we really like. What we can now do is grab all of these clips, right click, and just simply change them from look 2 to all footage. So we can assign it to now our first look, and you can see that it's quickly moved all of the clips between different looks. So using this workflow, you could have a whole range of groups. We can just create another group right now and add into a new group. This could be called look 3. And then what starts to happen in our Lightbox is over on the left-hand side here, we have a section called groups, and we can just cycle through all of these different looks and all of the shots and see which shots are assigned to what looks. Now, for example, if this was a scene in a film or a documentary, we could assign these into look 2. And what happens here is this moves over to look 2, and under look 3, we have all of the shots under look 3. So that is a way you could use your group post clip to manage your look development across a large program. For now, I'm just going to move this back to the original look that we have there. I'm going to stop myself there because I could talk all day about workflow. Hopefully there were a few tools and techniques in there that you'll be able to utilize within your own workflow. And that's the most important thing, is take ownership over these tools and develop your own workflow. I definitely learn from a whole range of different people and pull it all together to make a workflow that works for me and works for my brain and my logic. But the most important thing is become really familiar with the workflow. And the more consistent you can be between each job, the more control that you're going to have and the more mastery you'll have over a particular workflow. So that's it for now. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. And remember, there are a few free assets that you can download using the link in the video description. Download them for your own workflow, and happy color grading. We'll see you in the next one. Peace out.